Hello, and thanks for joining us for the partnership panel with Newcastle for Intermediaries, Episode 1, First Time Buyers. I'm Samantha Partington, freelance journalist for Mortgage Solutions. Across 4 videos, we'll be diving into some of the market's main buyer and product areas to discuss the challenges they face, the opportunities they pose, and the support available for brokers. These include the changing needs of first-time buyers, affordability challenges facing this year's borrowers, the support available for self-employed clients, and the complexities around large loan lending. First-time buyers are expected to remain the biggest borrower demographic this year. They continue to face the same challenges as they have in recent years, such as high house prices, high rents, which make it tough to save for a deposit, higher interest rates than the market has been used to, and now higher stamp duty. But are their needs changing? Frankie, I wanted to come to you first for this one. As I've said, although the same obstacles are standing in the way of first-time buyers, how have their needs and circumstances changed?
Yes, certainly at Newcastle for Intermediaries. I think what we see in terms of first-time buyers is their needs continually change, small nuances over periods of time. Right. And what we often look at when we look at first-time buyers is we'll usually look at the averages. So if we look at the average age of a first-time buyer here today, that's 33 years old. Wow. The average term for a first-time buyer today is 31 years. What that means is that's the average. So there'll be places across the UK where that's slightly impacted more so than others. So I think us as lenders, what we need to have a look at is how we can work with our broker partners, our distribution partners, to understand them nuances across the UK and them individual challenges. You mentioned them before, Sam. The big ones continually remain the ongoing cost of living crisis, ongoing availability in terms of raising deposits, and also the quality of stock available to us in quantity across the UK. Which remains a big challenge, doesn't it, that lack of available, suitable homes for first-time buyers? It does, yes, absolutely. And my perspective on that one is that when we're looking at that, we're looking at today's generation's needs, but we also should be looking at future generations' needs too. And what I would personally love to see on that perspective is a cross-party, long-term solution to the lack of stock available in the UK. Lenders will quite often look at trying to solve the demand issues when it comes to home buying, and we come up with some really good solutions, both in the banking space, the non-banking sector, and also in the building society sector. But really that needs to work in tandem with the quality in terms of supply. So it's always that balance of supply versus demand of housing across the UK, which we need to get right. And Tony, what are you seeing from the broker's point of view? What do you see in terms of differences in first-time buyers' circumstances?
I'd agree with Frankie, first of all, in that our brokers would tell us that demographic of first-time buyers is absolutely changing. For example, a large portion now of first-time buyers tend to be foreign nationals, where there might be a visa requirement as part of lending criteria. Also, flats and apartments that tend to sort of fall inside the first-time buyer portfolio. There are different criteria needs around that. I think we'd all agree that gone are the days of the 5% and 10% deposit requirement per se across the board. And the innovation is greatly welcomed by brokers, especially things like the joint borrowers, sole proprietary type mortgages, which I know Newcastle have in their product range. That's very much welcomed. I think what we need to help brokers with is tell them what's possible in this market as opposed to what's not possible now.
And what about sort of things like, are we seeing more first-time buyers who are self-employed? Because when I think of a first-time buyer, I think of the traditional, perhaps graduate, on the first rung of that career. But what about first-time buyers who've got the added complexity of being self-employed as well?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there is an element of increase in that self-employed borrower from a first-time buyer perspective, but also, even if they're not fully self-employed, some of the brokers would tell us that actually there are multiple income sources. So borrowers where there's a second income coming in, whether that's website design of an evening or a second job to boost their income. So there is that complexity as well there.
So, Ben, how are lenders' solutions to meet the needs of first-time buyers evolving?
I think what we've heard from Frankie and Tony, things are having to change, because maybe 5-10 years ago, the product solution for a first-time buyer was very much focused at the traditional, first-time buyer, and it would have just been focused on maybe the deposit raising What we have to do now is we have to look at how we can support new borrowers coming onto that property ladder through multiple lenses, and the propositions have to support multiple elements of the borrowing criteria. So I think what we're seeing now is lenders want to lend. They want to support first-time buyers, and we are seeing a huge amount of innovation across the market. Whether that's the innovation in joint mortgage sole proprietor, we're seeing some big changes in terms of shared ownership. We're seeing individual lenders really increase the amount that they'll lend from an LTV perspective and reduce that deposit needed to take that first step. And all of them are welcome, but there's no one-stop shop in terms of a fix. I think what we need to have is we need to have a wide range of options that can support each of the borrowing requirements. And I think that goes back to your point, Tony. It's then an education. How can you then start to educate brokers so that they're aware of all of the opportunities out there, because the product and proposition might not fit a traditional sourcing system that it would have done in the past.
Yeah. And quite often, isn't it, when you're talking about that, if it's all right for me to come in, Sam, is you'll talk around brokers are looking for speed quite often, but I think the most important thing when you're talking around first-time buyers is probably certainty.
Yes.
If you think about the chain and where they are in that chain as well, so brokers are looking for some lenders who can provide that certainty. So do you have the ability to speak to an expert, someone to shape that case with you pre-decision in principle, where you can talk through the nuances of the criteria? And I think it's really interesting, the part around Tony, that you mentioned around the multiple income sources, because we're seeing that now across the UK, across the generations. People want more than one income source. Back for that point of certainty.
Yeah, and how important is it to apply flexible underwriting to first-time buyer cases, Ben?
I think it is. It's vital. There'll be many borrowers out there that don't need that flexibility, but equally there's many borrowers who do need that flexibility. And I think that's where lenders' different credit appetites can change. But what we're seeing is, I think we're seeing a lot of lenders move more into that space. We have to look at, it is a challenge to raise that first deposit, and we know that a lot of borrowers will then go into the rental space, and that then makes that first step even harder. So I think where lenders can really step in is to take in that experience of rental, paying your rent and owning a home from that perspective, and then really starting to build that into a sensible lending decision to support them on getting that first mortgage.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just the need of flexibility around criteria, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, but I think it's also around affordability and trying to understand the individual nuances of the potential customer. And what I mean by that, again, is that access to an expert to give you that certainty up front around what you can and what you can't take in terms of income. So you apply the underwriting flexibility, not just the criteria, but it's great when you can do that to affordability too.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Well, thanks very much, everybody. We'll draw things to a close there. And please join us again for the next segment.